So I'm really excited to be here talking with bringing these wonderful suppliers to Canadians. Just to let you know, in this presentation, can you all, Jane, can you see the free PDF booklet slide?
Yep, it's right on the screen.
Awesome. I just wanted to let you all know that link there will connect you to a booklet about this presentation and all the wonderful people we have in it. So throughout this presentation, you'll see kind of in this little corner, all these beautiful images. We don't really have a lot of time to talk about these places. So if you go to that PDF booklet, you'll be able to kind of delve more in depth into this presentation. So don't worry about writing things down or anything like that. There's a link there and you can get all this information downloaded to your computer. Irish genealogy in Canada is very important. I've linked this story down here. BBC.com worked with Tourism Ireland and the Northern Ireland Tourist Boards to talk about Canada's connection specifically to Ireland, because there's huge links between Canada and Ireland. Over 60% of total arrivals into Canada from 1815 to the 1860s were from Ireland. 60% of all arrivals into Canada. So today, 10% of Canadians claim direct Irish ancestry. That's about 4.5 million people in Canada. And, you know, there's millions of stories in Canada, all tracing back to Ireland. And if you have Irish ancestry, you're in luck, because Ireland is a treasure trove of local repositories and records. I mean, Ireland, we do ancestry in a lot of different countries, as you can imagine, and we work with a lot of different stories. But there's something really interesting about Ireland, because there's so much information in Ireland that you can get your hands on, from workhouse records. One of the only countries that we can really get that information is in Ireland, to local valuations, even business directories with details like advertisements and images of individual businesses. And some of these directories date back all the way from the late 1780s to the mid 1940s. So there's a ton of information available at our fingertips that goes beyond the 1911 census. Ireland is in no shortage of great photographic collections either. Some of these are held at a national level. So you've got the Lawrence collection in the National Library of Ireland. But there's many towns and villages that also have local repositories of photos as well. Ireland has a profound network of these local repositories of photos, but also local libraries and archives, as well as dedicated county libraries and archives, city libraries. So yeah, if you have Irish ancestry, you can learn so much more about the shape and the development of your ancestral community. There's so much tangible evidence. Now, there is a warning when you're doing Irish research online. There's no doubt that these local sources offer rich research for family historians, but we must warn you that not all these county libraries have an abundance of online resources to assist if you're researching from home. So, you know, they might have an online catalog, but it's not easy to search. It's not a searchable catalog, or you can like only get a sample of what their total holdings are in their records. So that's why it's so important that you connect with genealogy guides and the ancestral community on the ground in Ireland. And that's why today we'll be introducing you to some of our most favorite friends in genealogical research. Joining us live from Ireland, here's your chance to connect with the absolute greatest. I'm going to start off by introducing each of the wonderful friends that we have. Fiona, we'll start with you. You're a family historian, a genealogist, a writer, a researcher. You're Trinity College alumni. You studied at Trinity College and you've taught at Trinity College as well. Again, you've worked with the greats from Joe Biden to the Obamas, and now you're the director of the Irish Family History Center. Did you want to say hello to everyone and tell us a little bit about yourself? Oh, is she there?
She's having trouble getting her mic on, so I'm just going to find her and turn it on.
My mic is on.
Yay. There she is. Hi, Fiona. How are you?
Sorry about that. I was letting extra people in that were not registered already. So sorry, I was off the screen.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yep. How are you, Fiona? Thanks for joining us so late at night.
It's not too late yet. I think
Yeah.
we are still at 7 o'clock, so early evening here.
Yeah,
Lovely to meet you, Samantha. How are you?
good. I'm great. It's great. I've got to say, the stuff that you've been doing on Facebook, those live events are so wonderful. So you must be working your butt off right now, no?
We've had a really busy and a very productive lockdown, that's for sure. Yeah, we started off the Genealogy Live at 5 on Fridays just to stay busy. The first couple of weeks were kind of, we didn't know what was going to happen, and they just took off. So we've had a fantastic response. We're reaching about 5,000 people a week.
Isn't that wild? That's wild.
Oh,
That's fantastic.
So,
She might.
Myself.
Sorry, you're a bit frozen there, Fiona.
Oh gosh. Okay, technology is both a wonderful help and it can also be a wonderful, a terrible problem. Will I introduce myself, Samantha?
Yes, please. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the Irish Family History Center, where you're located, how long you've been there, and what you do.
Great. The Family History Center at EPIC has been there from 2016 when EPIC first opened. We have a visitor center there. The center hosts a team of genealogists. We can either meet with visitors in person or virtually. We can meet people online. And we can help people with all of their research questions. We can take you from the very beginning, getting your research started. Hobbyists who've been involved for a longer time, we can help you with your brick wall problems. And we can also do a complete A to Z of research for people. We work with a lot of people coming in from North America who are visiting Ireland and they want to set up an itinerary in advance. So we identify places like the old homesteads, the villages they came from, churches, graveyards. We're setting up something which is, I suppose, it's going to personalize their visit and they can make the best use of their time.
Fantastic. Yeah. And there's 4 different packages that you offer at the Irish Family History Center when we get back to traveling again. We can't wait, but it's wonderful that we have a direct connection to you right now. We can start working on these brick walls now. That's wonderful. That's great. So I'll move on. I've got at the end, I'll let everyone know that I do have some questions prepared for each of our guests, but I'm going to move along to our next guest here, who's again, very much connected to the Irish Family History Center because it's within the same at the Custom House. David Cleary, you represent the EPIC Museum in Dublin. Can you tell us a little bit about the museum? What can we see there? What can we do there?
Sure, Samantha. Hello to everyone and good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be joining you this afternoon. So just to give you a bit of a brief introduction to EPIC for those of you that may not have heard of us, we are a relatively new museum in museum terms. We've just come up on our 5th birthday. So as Fiona mentioned there, our partners in the Irish Family History Centre, EPIC and the Irish Family History Centre are both located in the beautiful CHQ building, which is in the centre of Dublin. The CHQ building is an old whiskey, wine and tobacco warehouse. It's over 200 years old. So between the two of our experiences in the heart of Dublin, people really get a fantastic introduction to Irish history and genealogy history as well, in their own personal family histories. EPIC tells the story of the Irish people that have gone all over the world. We do it in a little bit of a different way. When we opened, we were the world's first fully digital museum, which just tells you that we tell the story of those Irish people in a little bit of a different way. It's a very modern style of a museum. But at the heart of our story is essentially Irish people. We are a museum of stories. We are a museum of telling the story of those 10 million Irish people that left the island of Ireland over 1,500 years that we tell the timescale. And obviously you mentioned at the very start that 4.5 million Canadians directly claim Irish ancestry. Essentially what we're doing in the museum is telling their stories. And through my colleagues and our partners here on the call, the professional genealogists, they will be able to trace that personal story and really that personal link to someone. What we do at EPIC is we tell that overall narrative. We look at the reasons why people were having to emigrate through history, whether it's through famines or through wars or through socioeconomic factors. We look at where they went to. We look at how they traveled all over the world. And then more importantly, towards the end of the museum, we very much want to celebrate what happened to these people. We want to show the Irish influence all over the world. We want to show people that there is much more to Ireland and Irish people than leprechauns or pots of gold. There's more to us than potatoes and Guinness and drink. We like to celebrate our writers, our inventors, the people that have gone on to discover new worlds. We like to discover that Irish influence. Look at the things that people kind of think of in a positive way for Irish people. And again, we like to find out why saying I'm Irish is one of those biggest conversation starters that you can have no matter where you are. So it's a really exciting thing to be able to share with people those stories of Irish people. So again, we can chat a little later on, Samantha, and if anyone has any queries or questions, I'd love to answer them.
Yeah, we do have a few questions for you, David, but thanks again for being here. And I can vouch for Epic Museum. My goodness, what an incredible place to see, even if you don't have a direct link to the ancestry yourself. So much of Ireland has shaped Canada. So, and I myself have seen those examples in the museum. So it's great to have you along. I'll move on to Dr. Michael Martin. Hi, Michael, how are you?
Good afternoon, everybody. The evening here in Cove is not as depicted behind me. It's weather is quite dull, but we're all very excited about the impending return of our visitors later in the year, we hope.
Hopefully, can't wait to come back. And Cove is such an incredible place. Cork City, my goodness, such a wonderful place. You've written a ton of books about the Titanic Trail. Can you tell us what is the significance of Cove and Titanic?
Yeah, well, Cove became one of the primary ports of emigration. In fact, the primary port of emigration from the middle of the 19th century right up into the middle of the 20th century. There were different times in history. The further you go back, the more ports there were from where people left because ships were smaller. Certainly to Canada in the 18th century, many of the vessels went from Northern Ireland. During the famine, Dublin would have been the main exit port for certainly 52% or more of those that emigrated during the famine went through Dublin. But from 1862 on, which is when the railroad arrived into Cove, it became Ireland's major port of emigration. So what we do is in 1998, I established an historical walking tour in the town called the Titanic Trail. And we take visitors on a 1-hour guided tour of the town every day. And we've been operating every day since the 8th of July, 1998. So you never have to call and say, is there a tour on that day? We have a tour every day. We can provide variations in the tour as well. Some people are interested in a particular element of the heritage of the harbour because Cove and Cork Harbour really reflect a very wide range of military, maritime, social and emigrant history. There are historians who believe that more than half of all the emigrants who ever left Ireland across the centuries came through this small town here. And I suppose what prompted me to establish this tour is that all the original building, streets and piers are all still there. So when we're taking people on a walk through the town and telling them about people often came and stayed in hotels the night before or rooming houses. There's one such hotel that's the building that they left from. And we often have a situation where people know, oh, my great grandparents left, you know, in the early 1900s on such and such a ship. We can often show them the building and say, well, that's the actual building they left from. So when they come on the tour, really they're projected into the same streetscape, the same physical environment that their ancestors were in. You know, I'm not a professional genealogist, but we give them sort of context of the emigration process, because when people are looking out across at Spike Island and the rest of the harbour, they're looking at the same panoramic views that their ancestors did while they're there. So we provide a whole variety of tours. A walking tour of Cove is just one of them. We do a city walking tour in Cork as well. And of course, the name of the tour that we do in Cove derives from the fact that Titanic's last port of call was in Cork Harbour. Now, the ship was only there very briefly, and I'm one of the few people, and Cork Harbour is one of the few places that puts it perhaps into a different historical context, in that most of the people on board were emigrants. Titanic was an emigrant ship, you know, and that's what we do in our tour. We bring to life, I suppose, the reality of those who made that journey from many parts of Ireland and came through this actual town. So you're walking in the streets. That's what we bring to the whole question of emigration.
Isn't that breathtaking? I can't wait to get back. In the meantime, though, Michael, you've been doing a lot online yourself, so you are a very easy person to connect with as well. So that's wonderful. Have you been anything? And are you writing something as well right now?
Well, somebody like, we're always writing something. So yeah, I'm involved in writing a book at the moment. It's early days though. I've written a couple of books on different historical topics. For example, the first book ever written about Spike Island, I wrote in 2007. I've written a book about the Lusitania as well, which gives you, I suppose, it's like a very factual look at the Lusitania, because like Titanic, both Lusitania and Titanic, and indeed emigration, I suppose, would fall into this category. A lot of the real narrative suffers from popular myths and popular narratives. I'm always inclined to look for the reality of the narrative rather than the popular myths, you know, so that's what I'm engaged in most of the time. I try my best to keep afloat on you know, the internet and social media and all that. I have to say, I've been doing it for a while, but not getting any better at it, you know. Maybe I will someday.
We'll keep supporting you nonetheless. My last but definitely not least is Roots Revealed with Natalie Bodal, and she's in Northern Ireland. So I'm so happy that Natalie was able to join us, because Northern Ireland needs to be represented as well in this conversation. You're a professional genealogist, Natalie, but you're also a registered qualified tour guide as well. So you're very hands-on, bringing people into all, I mean, and you're not just in Northern Ireland, although you're based there, but your tours bring you all over the Republic as well. How are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, Samantha. I'm very well, thank you, and it's lovely to be here with you tonight. So I am based in a town called Ballymena, which is in County Antrim. And for those people who aren't just sure of the geography, that's the very northeast county in the island of Ireland. So as Samantha says, I do genealogy research throughout Ireland, and I specialise in Northern Ireland and Ulster, the 9 counties of Ulster. And I do the tour guiding as well. And there's some photographs here of, you know, taking a few visitors around an old lumpy, bumpy graveyard and looking at some of the headstones that are associated with their ancestors. So that's always a lovely thing to be able to do. And, you know, like to take people and show them those places that are associated directly with their ancestors.
It's wonderful work. How long have you been running Roots Revealed for?
3 years now.
Oh, wow. 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 And over the lockdown, have you been doing a lot online as well?
Actually, I do genealogy evening courses, and I had started out doing my previous life. I had been a management development trainer in organization development, so I decided to use that to provide genealogy evening courses, and I did that for local people. And then whenever lockdown came, we thought we had a couple of courses that were planned, and we thought, well, what do we do? Would this work on Zoom? But actually it did, and it worked very well. And we were oversubscribed. So that was fantastic. I'm really pleased with how well that went. And it gave some people something, you know, they said about how much they enjoyed it because it gave them something to look forward to every week. We ran it once a week for 10 weeks, and then they were getting really stuck into their research during the lockdown. So give them a focus, but then they were also able to, you know, have a chat with other people, and we had an online group, you know, where they could interact with each other outside of the actual course time. So that was fantastic for people.
That's awesome. That's great. And yeah, the lockdown's great for giving us this downtime to further explore research and to connect with you is just wonderful. It's so great. Thanks to everyone for being here. I have 5 questions that are my wonderful friends here have already read through. The first one I'm going to ask Fiona and Natalie, just because you guys are professional genealogists with us today. So we touched upon local valuations and business directories. I very briefly touched on that stuff. What do you, and also, Fiona, if I can start with you, what other useful sources can we find in Ireland when we're researching our family tree?
Gosh, that's a bit of a how long is a piece of thread question. I love the Valuation Office records. For me, the Valuation Office records are the backbone of Irish genealogy. They take you from 1830 right the way through to the 1980s. So you can search back and forwards. I know, it's fantastic, 150 years, that's 5 generations as a genealogist. Property is often better documented than people, and that's certainly the case with these records. We can use the records to trace families back in time, and it's one of the reasons why I say we can take virtually every Irish family back to the 1830s. But even where somebody left, we can use these records to trace forward in time. So when we worked with President Obama and Vice President Biden, as he then was, we heavily used the records, these Valuation Office records, to identify living relatives as well. And so that's a really good source. I love the simple, straightforward, the births, marriages and deaths, not least because they're available online on irishgenealogy.ie, and they're available for free. We have non-Catholic marriages from 1845, but that includes also interfaith marriages. So if you had a Catholic ancestor who married somebody of a different faith, you might find them there from April 1845. And then we have marriages and deaths from January 1864. And I'll zip now and hand over to Natalie.
Oh, wow. I did not even think of living relatives today that you can search for. That's incredible. Sorry, Natalie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just think that, you know, there are so many records that have not been digitized, and suppose people aren't just aware of the whole wealth of records there are. And I suppose some of the examples, estate records are excellent. For example, the MacDonald estate in County Antrim, so they had over 500 square miles of an estate in County Antrim and spreading over into County Derry. And they have fantastic records there. So, you know, leases, deeds, rent records. And if your ancestor lived within the MacDonald estate area, you know, there's a very good chance that we can maybe trace your family through those estate records. As Fiona says, you know, it's about the land. Sometimes you might not be able to find someone in the civil registration records before a certain date, but you may be able to find them in the estate records, in the land records. So that's fantastic. There's also a wealth of church records that haven't been digitized. So they're available in the record repositories. For example, in ProNI, which is the Public Records Office of Northern Ireland based in Belfast. And then you get some of those wee quirky records as well. So, you know, like spirit license registers, you know, in these great big bound volumes. So if your ancestor had a pub for a while, you know, you can find your ancestor in those records as well. So lots of wee quirky things, you know, like where you can potentially track people down.
That is so, that's interesting that you can get it. There's spirit records. That's incredible. So even if you licensed a pub, you would be included in those records.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's very cool. And can you tell us just, I'm just curious about, and everyone will get a chance to have questions after I go first. But what about those rental records? What can you see from those rental records?
Yeah, well, I mean, it very much depends on the, you know, the particular records, you know, what's available. Sometimes there's, you know, a list of names. Sometimes the records are very detailed. You know, it can list out on the annual basis, you know, when the person paid their rent. They generally paid their rents twice a year. And you can see when they paid the rent, when a property maybe then changed from a father to a son. If there are leases, the leases could have been on a variety of terms, but ideally if you can get someone that was had a 3-life lease, so those lives are named and it gives the ages and the names and the relationships of the people in the deed. So if that's family members, then you can maybe trace someone back to, you know, maybe 50 or 60 years previous to the, you know, the ancestor who signed the deed. So it very much depends on the particular records. But a fantastic wealth of information that's, you know, sitting there in the archives just waiting to be discovered.
Oh, there's so much that still needs to be discovered, and especially in the years to come as things get more declassified, and you know we'll get more and more, and that I think that's what makes Ireland such an interest. Like anyone who has any sort of link to Ireland is so lucky, because there's so many different types of resources that we can acquire. That's great. Fiona and Natalie, Fiona, I'll direct this question to you first. What about the workhouse records? What are those, and why would those be of particular interest to Canadians?
Gosh, well, workhouse records, if you can find them, are an excellent source. Part of the problem we have there is that during the War of Independence and the Civil War, workhouses were identified as a legitimate target. And we actually find instances of the IRA capturing the workhouse, going in, taking the records and building a bonfire in the central courtyard. We can surmise why they might have done this, possibly because family members had availed of the workhouse at one time or another, and it was seen as something so shameful, people wanted to destroy the records. So that's my first thing, that a huge number of the admissions and discharge registers in workhouses have actually been destroyed. Wow. We don't have them anymore. Wow. What we do have, and what we have in an excellent survival rate, are the Poor Law Union Guardian's minutes. So we have an awful lot of the discussion and debate at board level about how decisions made concerning the inmates of the workhouse. Find My Past, the subscription website, has begun gathering up what records survive and digitizing those. And as I understand, they already have all the surviving records for the City and County of Dublin, for County Donegal, surviving records for Sligo, Clare, and Waterford. So they have 5 counties currently available. But there's a much better survival rate for Northern Ireland.
Sorry, what was that last thing you said?
There's a much better survival rate of workhouse records for Northern Ireland than there is for the South.
Really? Okay, I understand. I see. And Natalie, have you seen that? Have you worked with any workhouse records?
Yes, I mean, they're a fantastic resource. So, you know, you have a whole range of different types of records. But again, you know, you can't say that every single workhouse that was in existence, that all of the records survive, because that's not the case. It's patchy survival in different places. But, you know, so you can have the admission registers, the discharge registers, you can have outdoor relief registers, you know, like where there were too many people in the workhouse and the workhouse couldn't take any more inmates in. So people were given outdoor relief, and that's recorded. You have people who went into the infirmary, you know, maybe either because they were ill, and unmarried mothers quite often went in and had their children and then left a few weeks later. You have baptismal registers for children who were born in the workhouse. So, you know, like fantastic resource, very good.
Wow, if you can get your hands on it.
Mhm.
That's very interesting. My next question for the two of you, that's kind of sparked a few more questions for me, but I'll leave that till our next time. In your family research, were there any surprising discoveries, and is there anything of particular note that you want to share with us? Natalie, do you want to go first?
Well, actually, I've just come across, there's a piece of research I'm doing at the minute, and I think from what I have found that there was a bigamous marriage. So I was quite shocked when I saw this, and I need to do a wee bit more digging just to double check, but I'm reasonably sure that this was a bigamous marriage. So I'm not quite sure how the client will receive this information. They might be a bit shocked because it was fairly recent within the family tree. So we shall have to wait and see.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure. And that's a good thing to note, because we come across that all the time when we're working with families. We come across something, and you know, many people who work in this industry could say the same thing. You come across something that's particularly sensitive or difficult to explain. The amount of times that we've come across undisclosed paternity, that's a real interesting one. Fiona, how about for you? Any surprising discoveries for yourself?
I have found some very surprising things, but I can't always talk about them.
Yeah, that's right.
Commissioned work. Bigamous marriages are a really common one. We
Oh,
used to call it, we have a team of genealogists, and bigamous marriages are so common. We used to call them divorce Irish style. That very often you see that the couple obviously decided that it wasn't working out, and one person might remain behind and the other person moves. And the reason why we think it must have been a decision by both is that the adult children often remain in contact with both parents, including when one of the parents remarries.
Wow.
So 19th, early 20th century, we actually see quite a lot of this. Anything unusual? I remember working with one TV producer who, he was always looking for the scandalous. He was always looking for things that would raise an eyebrow. But what I particularly remember about him was that we got a fantastic story about one of the people we were working up for the documentary, an involvement on the Battle of the Nile. And there were fabulous drawings and paintings. You know, this was a real cause célèbre in the early 90s, at the time that it happened. And what made my mind melt is that this guy just wanted to focus on the fact that our celebrity had a bigamous marriage. But I thought, what about the Battle of the Nile? Surely that's a much more interesting story. And it's something which has more of I suppose, a wider appeal. So I suppose a lot of it depends on whether you are trying to present the story as being a personal narrative, which is unique to an individual or a family, or presenting a narrative which might appeal to a wider audience. So this is the thing, that sometimes you have to sit back and you have to think how best to tell the story so it will reach the widest audience.
Yeah, That's the toughest thing for all of us, I think, is to try to paint that picture, engage with everyone. Absolutely. Yeah. But I would be so interested in the Battle of the Nile. That is so interesting. You guys must see a lot of that when it comes to people and their military connections and such exciting pieces of history. Like, incredible. Another question I have for Fiona and Natalie before I turn it on to David and Michael is, what records should Canadians specifically spend their time researching? Is there anything in particular that, you know, Canadians, a part of that emigration, should be looking at specifically? Natalie, do you want to take that first?
Okay, well, I suppose, you know, the thing is to try and find out as much as you can about the person and the family in the country that they emigrated to. Because quite often there are really useful clues, you know, that can be found that will assist your research then whenever you try to come and find more information about them in Ireland. So, you know, for example, we've a really strong naming tradition here. So, you know, if children are called particular names, it can give a clue to the names of the child's grandparents, if they followed the naming tradition. And within the Ulster Scots in particular, there's a very strong tradition of using maiden names, usually of the mother's family, as either a first name or as a middle name. So, for example, you'll find men who are called Miller, Thompson, Boyd, you know, as a first name, but it's been maybe a mother's or a grandmother's maiden name. So those can be useful clues. If you find a surname, either as a middle name or first name, keep an eye out for those within your family tree as well.
That's a good tip. That's a good tip. Fiona, how about yourself? What do you think Canadians should be spending their time on?
Let me see, if you don't know where in Ireland your family came from, then your starting point should do what we call a reverse genealogy. There's often more evidence that survives for the person, for the immigrant ancestor in the host country, the country of settlement, than there is in the country of origin. Look at things like church records, particularly if they settled in a part of Canada that was previously French. The French followed the old canons. So, for example, if you marry in a Catholic church that was formerly in a French territory, you'll find not only the bride and groom's father's names, but even their mother's maiden name given in the church records. It's fabulous information. We used this when we were searching for, what's your premier?
In Ontario or in Saskatchewan?
The Prime Minister?
Oh, Prime Minister Trudeau.
Oh, is he the current guy? The previous guy.
Yeah, no, Justin Trudeau. Yeah,
Justin
he's the handsome one.
That's him. Yeah.
Right? Oh, the Canadians are nodding there.
The 1970s. So we used that for his family, and we've used it for very many Canadian Irish. And Canadian Irish, like you say, there's a huge history of settlement. You get people coming in from the 1780s in Newfoundland. Very often people settling in Newfoundland are coming from the southeast, Wexford and Waterford.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
With the herring fleets. They came across from the early 1600s. They don't begin to settle there until the 1780s. The winters were too harsh. So they literally jumped on board a ship in the spring, sailed to Newfoundland, had a summer season, and then returned home, usually by late September, October. But we find a lot of the families exactly settling in that part of Canada. So reverse genealogy, look to see when they arrived, where they settled. Look at church records, census records if they actually have them, if they're arriving at a later time. There are some, from the 1830s, there's some good immigration records in ports, which can tell you more. I always like to see who are the people traveling with, because people never emigrate in isolation. They always travel with family, but also friends and neighbors. You know this whole idea of kith and kin. We know what kin is, but the kith are the closest family, friends, neighbors, and associates.
Oh.
And when people crossed the Atlantic, they usually had those close associates with them. So I like to see who else is traveling on board the ship. I always look for anybody else of the same name who is around the same age group. You can often have adult brothers traveling together. You might have 2 or 3 brothers. I like to see who are the other names. And do any of these people settle in or around when they actually move onto the land? Because many Irish, particularly in Canada, go not to the cities, but actually settle on the land. So when they settle, who else is settling around them? Is there a concentration of Irish people? And if there is, sometimes if I can't find the individual, I do what social historians call a prosopography. American genealogists call FANS, Friends Associate Network. And you look to see, you move your search outwards and you look to see who else is living in the locality. And you try and identify whether they all come from the same place, from the same county, for example.
Sorry, I'm muted. A perfect example of that is Caledon Hills in Toronto. For anyone in Ontario, you'll notice that Caledon Hills, that whole area, has all of these Irish sounding town names, Sligo, and so that's, and Wexford, of course, very strong connection with Newfoundland. But as Fiona said, those groups of family and friends that start these little settlements and these pockets still exist today. So Caledon Hills is a perfect example for Ontario, but also out here, there's these little pockets. That's great. Thanks, Fiona. Now I'm going to turn it on to David at the Epic Museum. Why would it be important? What can Canadians see at the Epic Museum, and why would it be important for Canadians to physically visit this place?
I think one of the most important things, and Michael mentioned it earlier on, that if you're tracing your Irish ancestry, is you get to see the same views that your ancestors would have seen. Depending on how much information you know prior to coming, you can obviously plan your trip around your itinerary and your trip around Ireland, in the hope of finding the same townlands, and maybe you might get to meet some of your distant relations as well. So being physically here in the country, it's that tangible history. You hopefully will have done a certain amount of research before you arrive, to help inform you. But if not, we have so many options available to meet with genealogists, either in Dublin or going up to Ulster with Natalie, or down to Cove with Michael. So being able to be guided in that sense, to be able to be shown the townlands and just have that tangible sense of your own history is really, really strong. And to answer your first point about what can Canadians particularly see in Epic, is obviously in Epic we tell the story of all of the Irish people that went all over the world. A huge amount of them obviously went to Canada, but you've mentioned it a couple of times in terms of connections, and that's what we're all trying to find, and we're all kind of really, really driven by, is those connections to our Irish history. And that's actually what EPIC stands for. It stands for Every Person is Connected, because we like to show the connections that Irish immigrants made in their new world. But we also like to celebrate and show the connections that those people of Irish descent have back to Ireland. So very much what you're trying to do is, for those Canadians that are coming back to Ireland, is to find those connections and to explore them and to celebrate them, and to see those buildings that they may have left from, or to see those landscapes that they may have lived in, because it hasn't really changed all that much in a couple of 100 years, not too much anyway.
Not as fast as over here in Canada. So absolutely, that's true. To see the landscape is so important. Michael, same question to you, my friend. What do you think Canadians can physically see in your neck of the woods?
Well, I suppose really they can see the whole physical environment in which they're.
Oh, we lost you there, Michael. Sorry, we can't hear you all of a sudden.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, yeah, yep. Yeah. I was going to say it's that same physical environment from which people emigrated and spent their last time in Ireland. Like I always say that in a town like Cove, and this is probably true of all over the country, under every stone and around every corner, there's a wealth of heritage to be extracted. And what makes up our heritage? Well, it's all about people. It's what people did. It's where they stayed. So we might point out things like that you'd pass by on the street. It's a horse trough that has a little place for your dog that you used to travel with. We show people, you know, the shipping company offices built from the early 1800s and even earlier. And we'd say, well, if you lean against that wall, it's the same wall that the Titanic passengers leaned against, you know, 109 years ago and so on. But I think for them to physically come here, in the Epic Centre in Dublin, you know, they're going to get a fabulous wide overview of the many places, the many areas they came from, the many places they left from. In Cove, we're really very lucky to be able to add to that story in a sense that we're showing people, you know, this is a church. The cathedral in Cove, which you can probably see behind me there, became known as the Emigrants Cathedral because although it only opened, they began to build it in 1868 and they began to have mass there in 1879. But most of the immigrants that were leaving would have gone there to get mass before they left. They were full of anxiety about the journey, so they wanted to go. And that cathedral is still there. In fact, 62% of the cost of the building of it came from benefactors and immigrants, you know. And like I say to people, walk in there, have a look. You know, it's the same building. And it's those sort of connections that we reveal to people that are with us on the tour, I suppose, that enriches their visit. And when they have, you know, personal family research to be done, look at the resources we've heard of already this evening from Natalie and Fiona. So we're just part of that whole family that can enrich and enhance the experience. But when you're seeing you know, Cove through the eyes of our tours, you're really immersing yourself into the experience that your ancestors had. That's what we offer.
That's right. It's immersive. You're physically there. That's what I think is so unique about physically being in Ireland and studying your family tree. It's just one of those, the resources are so varied. You can, so it's such a better way to paint a picture of what your family's life would have been like. And to see that tangibly, to feel it, to lean back against the wall. Oh my goodness, that's incredible. Like, it's incredible. It makes it a really meaningful experience. It's not just a vacation when we come to Ireland and research this stuff. It's a beneficial experience. We learn so much from it. We gain such a perspective. What support, what services do Canadians have both during and after COVID on the ground in Ireland? There's a ton of different stuff, but maybe I'll direct this question to you, Michael and David. What other supports are there in Canada when we're exploring Ireland in the destination?
Well, for people who are coming to travel, the Tourism Ireland website is a very useful thing to, you know, it's useful to tap in there and find out the sort of things that are here, what's going on and what isn't. In terms of COVID, what they have done is they have rolled out a charter that we have all signed up to, where we receive training and so on. And of course, it's one of the priorities now in attracting visitors is that they're going to be safe with us. So Tourism Ireland would have, Fáilte Ireland, and I'm sure the Northern Ireland Tourism Board as well, would have provided training for everybody involved in the industry so that people can become, feel, you know, safe and protected. And those of us that are providing services to visitors will always be compliant with whatever the national health advisories is at that time, but that is a resource in its own right. You know, the Fáilte Ireland and the Tourism Ireland. Is that what you mean? Is that
yeah,
the sort of
very much.
Yeah,
you. And that
I think it's very, very important to know that they're there, and you get all sorts of information, all sorts of images. about the attractions, about distances, travel times, all that sort of stuff is there. So it's a really, really good resource.
It is. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource. And that actually leads me into the PDF. But very quickly before we finish up with that, David, can you kind of add on to that when it comes to COVID regulations with the Epic Museum? What will it be like for us? What can we expect when we come back?
Yeah, I suppose we've all had to adapt to living with COVID, and particularly as we're coming out of our latest lockdowns over here. What's really encouraging is to see is that people, it's just part of our normal daily lives at this stage. You know, we opened the museum again last week for the first time in 6 months. Whereas before, when we'd opened last year, we had to keep reminding people to put on their mask, you know, keep encouraging them to do it. Whereas when we opened last week, we didn't have to tell one person, and it was an incredibly busy week. So it was fantastic to see the confidence from people to be able to come and visit the museum, wanting to get out and do things as well. To add to Michael's points about the supports and services, you know, if you're researching your vacation to Ireland, obviously there's a lot of support in reaching out to the Tourism Ireland, the Ireland.com website. But one of the best things to do is to speak to your travel agent. You know, speak to your person who's booking your trip. They are the Ireland experts. They speak to us as suppliers, both with Samantha and her colleagues and the travel agents. They speak to us on a daily basis. They know what's new. They know what's happening on the ground here in Ireland. You know, when you come over to Ireland, no matter what situation it is with COVID or not COVID, very much like Canadians, Irish people are incredibly welcoming. We will help. We will go out of our way to help people. So, you know, rest assured, even if people are traveling and COVID is still lingering around, you know, it'll be a very warm, welcoming environment. We've worked very hard here as a hospitality industry to make sure that currently our Irish visitors are at ease and can enjoy that hospitality in the best way possible. And when we're allowed to welcome back our overseas clients, it'll be very much the same thing, but hopefully less restrictions, you know.
Absolutely. And again, the tourist board has been doing wonders. I can't say enough good things about the preparedness and the level of support and the level of attention. For all of you, I'm just going to skip along here. I just wanted to show everyone, first of all, everyone who's joined our presentation today, thank you for joining us. We are willing to offer 5% off any of our custom trips. So if you're thinking of going to Ireland and working on your own customized tour, whether it's in a group or with your loved one, we are offering 5% off with this voucher. And that's valid until 2023, because we know it's going to be maybe a little bit longer for Canadians to get over there, but it's so important that we do this deep research now to get you prepared for that eventuality of us returning to Ireland. So everyone who signs up for that PDF booklet that we prepared will get 5% off that custom ancestral program to Ireland in 2022 and 2023. One lucky viewer today will receive 10% off their trip to Ireland, and will also be sent a Connection Tours gift giveaway from one of our favorite local suppliers in Ireland. So I'll leave that to Jane to choose that one lucky winner, but we're all lucky winners here, right, guys? Again, here's the PDF link, connectiontours.ca/Ireland Family PDF, and you'll be able to download this PDF here. I'm sure that's not sharing properly, but in this is all of our contact information for every single of our wonderful suppliers who joined us today, links to their website, their Facebook. Get in touch with them, connect with them, see all the incredible stuff they're doing online, guys. I can't stress enough, the live stuff that they've been doing is absolutely wonderful. Then we have 15 ways that you can get started. And Natalie and Fiona, actually all of you kind of threw out these wonderful resources that are available for all of us to see online. So I've listed 15 ways that you can start working on your family tree in Ireland. And there's also tons of places across Northern Ireland and the Republic that you can physically visit, from famine ships like the Jeannie Johnson, which is just outside the Epic Museum, to the American Storytelling Park in Ulster, Waterford. Goodness, the stuff coming out of the Waterford Viking Triangle is incredible. So there's a bunch of links for you there in this PDF. There's also links to these podcasts. You can click on those pictures and it'll come up with these wonderful podcasts that are going on. There's books, there's live events, there's magazines. Actually, that first magazine there, Irish Lives Remembered, that's written by the Irish Family Center with Fiona Fitzsimons. So, and that's free. You can download those for free. It's incredible, the stuff that's available. And of course, your 5% voucher is in there as well. So take a look at that. And I'm going to stop sharing now. Hello, all my wonderful people. So my last question to my 4 wonderful friends that are with us today. Any last tips or tricks that the Genealogy Club could gain from you guys? Any last tips or tricks you want to add for Canadians doing their family history or researching Ireland? I'll go in order. So Fiona, can we start with you? And I'll just go along the squares.
I would say have fun with it. No matter what you find, remember that you are still essentially you. It can be surprising sometimes what we find about people in an earlier generation, but in the same way that we can't claim their successes, we also can't claim their scandals. So don't take it too seriously. Enjoy it and get to see a little bit of Ireland. Get outside of Dublin.
Yes, yes. Get outside of Dublin. Wonderful. That's a great answer. Natalie, how about yourself? Any last tips or tricks? Oh, you're still muted. Yeah, it happens to me all the time.
Sorry. Yeah, just start as soon as possible. I mean, really, I suppose to reiterate what David said, you know, if you're going to come on a visit and you're maybe hoping to find out a bit more, try and come as prepared as possible, because we do hear these very sad stories, you know, of people turning up to centres and saying, oh, my great-great-grandmother was called Mary and she was from Ireland. Can you tell me all about her? And, you know, unfortunately, we rarely can. So get prepared, find out as much as you can, and come armed with your information as soon as you possibly can.
That is a great, that's very, very important to add. Do your research now before you go. How many times have I been on the coach with someone that said, oh, I think my great uncle is buried in this cemetery. And it's, to know that information ahead of time is the most important part. That's why this is so important to connect with you guys now. Oh, great answer. Michael, how about for yourself? Any last tips or tricks?
Well, I think preparation is the key, and I don't know how many times people have arrived here and they expect to get all the information here, and I think has been pointed out already, often there's better records in wherever they landed. The other thing as well is that a lot of people who arrived into Canada would have later drifted into the United States, so they have to keep an eye on that. And there are other resources there. One quirky one, I think, not directly involved in Canada, but you never know, because, you know, the further you go back, you'll see people travel or were mobile or moved around the world. But one set of records I think are very interesting is the convict records, those that were convicted and sent out to Australia from Britain and Ireland and a couple of other places, but over 170,000. But in the records they kept on convicts, they were great records. They have their height, you know, their names, markings on their bodies, and it can be really interesting if you have somebody in your background that was ever sent there. There was a time when people used to be ashamed of having a convict or a criminal in their background, but I think it's become quite fashionable now. So as Fiona said, embrace that and enjoy it and have a bit of fun with it. But certainly preparation before you come. You know, if you spend a few dollars on a book and read up about how to access or where to look, you'll have a much more enjoyable visit and get more from it.
Absolutely. Convict records. Ooh, there's so much. There's so many interesting little, every time I'm going through my regular life and thinking like, I had to do our census recently, and that's interesting because it's like, oh, maybe 100 years ago, someone will research this, convict records. That's good. David, any last tips or tricks for anyone? I mean, particularly coming to the Epic Museum, I think that would be interesting to see as well.
Yeah, I suppose there's two that kind of spring to mind immediately. One is obviously been mentioned before. It's come to Ireland, come and live the history. See those townlands, visit the townlands wherever it is on the island of Ireland. That's one of the most important things. And the other one is, and we would see it a lot in Epic, is people that have done their own ancestry and genealogy research, and they've hit that brick wall. Never underestimate, reaching out to the experts, reaching out to Natalie, Fiona, and some of the genealogists here in Ireland, because they can help answer a lot of questions for you very quickly. A lot of people do want to undertake the research themselves, and I commend them. I couldn't do it myself, but definitely, reaching out to the genealogists, it can just make that trip to Ireland so much more special for people, and it can really complete something in themselves, I think. So they're my two quick tips.
That's absolutely great tips. Absolutely important to know. I think really if we're looking at when we travel with intention and we work a year out on our trip, regardless if it's ancestry or otherwise, I think it creates such an important bond and connection, and it just enriches the experience so much. So, I mean, if we're spending all that money to go to a place, it's really great to have this knowledge before you go and make these connections before you go. I think that's one of the most important things for me. But also, I do want to mention just before we close up, and I'll pass it back to you, Jane. But just to let you know, if you don't think you have an Irish connection, just talking from personal experience, if you're from Scotland, England, or you do know that you have some sort of connection with the United Kingdom, Wales, for example, you might still have a link to Ireland. My family we were from Scotland, and my grandmother still lives there, and we were always Scottish. My grandfather was very proud of that. But when we did our ancestral research, we found out that only a couple generations before, we were from Ireland. So that 10% number when it comes to Canadians having a direct link to Irish ancestry, it might be a lot more than that, because I mean, 28% of Canadians claim Scottish ancestry, which is, we're talking about huge numbers. So it's always great, even if you don't know if you have a connection to Ireland's family, a family member that's connected to Ireland, you might, but you love Ireland still, you might still have a connection. It's still really interesting. And Ireland's diaspora is one of the largest in the world. So really, the 4 people that we have on our screen right now, like, you guys are the absolute pros, because not only are you, have been doing this for a very long time, but you're working with the largest diaspora in the world. There's so many countries, not just Canada, that can say they have these huge, strong ties and strong connections. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Very much appreciate it. Jane, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. And yes, thank you so much, Fiona, Michael, Natalie, and David. Like, it's been eye-opening and wonderful, and I can't wait to get there when I can get there. We had several questions in the chat. Some of them were answered by our experts in the chat, but I think we're running out of time, unfortunately. So if any of the Genealogy Club members or the people that signed on, if there's a question that you desperately want the answer for, please download the PDF, and you can contact the experts for that. I guarantee downloading that PDF will be the best thing you do today. So thank you so much for participating. Thank you, Sam, and thank you to our guests in Ireland. I'm just in awe of Ireland. I've never been there, but it's on my bucket list. It's at the top of my bucket list. So hopefully I'll see you sooner than later. So thank you to everyone in the Genealogy Club and for participating. be safe, be well, and we will see everyone hopefully soon. Take care.
Thanks again, Jane. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Samantha, for a lovely warm welcome.
We love you, Fiona. You keep rocking it, girl. Oh, man.
Everyone's saying thank you over the chat, so.
Lovely. Yeah, I just saw the chat at the end. I apologize for not answering those questions sooner. Hopefully that PDF will help. And hopefully you guys all don't mind staying connected with us here in Canada.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll make sure that we pick the winners, and I'll let Sam know who the winner will be for prizes that she announced.
Hi, Ellen. I love you, Ellen.
Lots of people saying thank you.
Yeah, that's great. It's so great to see so many wonderful friends in real life. If you're Ellen, and if anyone from the Battlefield Tours community is here this weekend, I'll post a link for us to do our own Zoom call to say hi. So just a heads up, if you're in the Battlefield Tours Travel Buddies world, we'll do that a little later this weekend.
Okay, so thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you all. Thank you all so much. I'll send you an email to say thank you again. Thanks, guys.